Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Kasa podcast. Today, we're going to dive right into some amazing conversation about applying to graduate education and some of the job market overlook. Today, I have a very amazing guest in. He is Dr. David Sobek. He's my advisor, my mentor, and probably one of my favorite people on the planet. He's going to help us to build winning grad school application packets. We're going to ask him so many questions about the graduate school application process and how we can stand out as candidates or applicants and secure funding for ourselves and get into grad school. David, how you doing?
Good. How you doing? That's a lot to do, but we can do it.
Yeah, it's a lot to do. It's a lot of stuff to cover. So we're going to fire the questions as fast as we can. So first of all, just give us a brief introduction.
Well, I've been doing this for a long time. I got my PhD in 2003, been at LSU since 2004.
Yeah.
This is my second stint as Director of Graduate Studies. So I've probably been Director of Graduate Studies on and off for about 10, 11 years at least.
Wow. So
yeah, it's a long time to have to deal with graduate students, that's for sure.
But it gets easy when you have to deal with graduate students like me, right? It gets pretty easy.
Sure. Sure. Yes.
I can say that and feel good about myself, can I?
Yes, you can say that.
So today, I think the conversation is going to be around the people who are trying to come into grad school, trying to get into grad school. What are some of the things we need to do to stand out? For a lot of us, I would use myself as an example. When I was putting together my application, I didn't know what was important. I didn't know what to emphasize on or what to actually get into. So my first question would be, the entire packet they ask us to provide, what is that one thing we should never overlook?
Having every part of the packet together, because all of it is going to. So, well, first off, let's talk in terms of what is typically in a grad school application, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you have the transcripts, mm-hmm. you have the scores, so GRE scores, TOEFL mm-hmm. scores. Mm-hmm. You have letters of recommendations, and mm-hmm. oftentimes you will have a writing sample. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. so the process of evaluation is generally a holistic thing, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. right? And so I wouldn't say there is sort of one thing that is necessarily significantly more important than another, but it sort of depends, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so one of the first things that you're going to be looking at would be GPA and standardized test scores.
Okay.
Right. But it's not as if, so for instance, let's just say a university requires your verbals to be above a certain threshold, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean that if it's below that threshold that you're automatically rejected, right?
Okay.
Okay. But what happens then is if you see that, then you go look at other parts of the application mm-hmm. to see if you can account for that, right? So if your verbal scores are low, then you go look at the letters of recommendation and see if mm-hmm. they say something about, oh, you know what, they were really sick when they took that, or, you know, they struggle with standardized tests. So you sort of try to, generally it's sort of a balancing of seeing, you know, if the one part of the application is strong or weak, mm-hmm. you know, what do the other parts of the application say about that?
That's interesting. So I think for most applicants, we're trying to figure out which one is the best. Should I focus on my transcripts? Should I focus on my statement of purpose? So we're probably being told that we should get a full packet together. We should make sure every part of our application packet is strong. And you mentioned something about the letters of recommendation. So can the letters of recommendation actually speak to why some of the grades or some of the things look the way they look?
Oh, yeah. A lot of times that happens a lot, right? So, mm-hmm. but mainly it is, so some students, when they start school, they might not be as focused. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so early in their education, their grades are pretty low. And then mm-hmm. something clicks their junior, senior year, and then they really sort of kick it up a notch, right? But then their overall GPA tends to be low. And then a lot of times we'll see a professor write a letter that says, hey, you know, they weren't really focused in their freshman, sophomore years, but then they sort of came around. Mm-hmm. And I can speak that, you know, what their grades are in the second half of their education is much more indicative of what they are than their first, right? And so a lot of times those letters are important in terms of giving context to the numbers. The numbers being the GPA and the GRE.
Okay. That's interesting because I did not know that. And I think a lot of applicants don't pay attention to the letters of recommendation. We just go to a professor and like, can you write me a letter of recommendation? And we just go to bed, right? But it looks like it can actually help explain the numbers on the other side.
Oh, and I'll say, don't ever ask a professor if they can write you a letter of recommendation, because the answer is always going to be yes. I can always write a letter of recommendation. It doesn't have to be a good one.
Okay.
So the question
so what should we do?
Can you write me a strong recommendation or a positive letter of recommendation? Right? Because there are students who I've had, mainly undergrad, who got a B- in my class, and they're like, "Hey, you write me a letter of recommendation?" Sure, I can. Right? But it's not going to be sort of a a stellar one. And so the answer to "Can you write me a letter of recommendation?" is generally going to be yes. But what you want is a letter of recommendation that can speak to you and speak positively about you as a student.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So now, not only are we learning that we should pay attention to the entire process, but even with the letters of recommendation, we should actually ask for strong or positive ones. Because I know my application packet, I just went and be like, hey, can you write me one? And normally, like you said, they'll be like, yeah. Sometimes I think for most people in Ghana, they would probably relate. The professor is like, okay, what do you want me to say? So you actually tell them what you know, and sometimes we're just like, we don't know because we've not actually done it ourselves, right? So now we're going to have to go and ask for strong recommendation letters. Actually have to. Okay, that's interesting. So aside the recommendation, and this is a question I got asked today to come and ask you. Is the GRE really important? Is it a big part of the process?
Yes, GREs are important. But like I said, it's not definitive, right? Because this is why we ask for GREs, we ask for transcripts, we ask for letter of recommendation, because not everyone is equally good at everything, and not everyone. Because what we're looking to see is, can you come here and be successful, right? And the GREs measure part of potential. Right, but it also is. But sometimes some people are just good at standardized testing. Some people are bad at standardized testing, right? And so, just because you have a really high GRE does not mean that you have a higher potential than someone who had a lower one. It could be that you do. It could also be that you're just good at standardized tests, right?
Okay.
And so that's why. So yes, they're important, and obviously the higher the better. But it is not necessarily, a good evaluation process understands that. GREs are not a perfect measure of potential, right? Just as transcripts aren't a perfect measure of potential, or writing samples not a perfect measure of potential, right? We're operating in an environment of low information, right? So what is there? There's that analogy of a blindfolded person grabbing the tail of an elephant.
Yeah,
thinks that this thing is one thing, and someone grabbing the trunk thinks it's something else. And that's sort of what we are. Right. So why there's all these different parts of the application, which is so we can get a more holistic and a better view of a student's potential.
Okay, that's wonderful. I think for some of the questions that are coming through the chat, I would address them. But if you're watching the live stream, please, if you have any questions, leave them in the chat below. We'd address some of them live, and then I would come back in and give answers to the questions you'd ask in chat. So if you're joining us, we're talking about the application process for grad school, how to be a successful applicant, the things to look out for. And we've already learned that one of the best things you can do for your packet is to make sure you look at everything holistically, look at everything in its entirety. And like Dr. Sobek just mentioned, every part of it gives an idea of what kind of student you are and whether or not you're going to be successful in the program. And another question, this came in chat, so I just put it up and then we can look at it. Should one wait until you get your results for a class before requesting for a letter of recommendation from the professor?
As a rule of thumb, probably, right? But if it's a class that you sort of know, though, this is a class that is, an upper level class, and you know that you're doing well in the class, and you and the professor are clicking, and you have a good relationship, then, it's not, I would never say never, but generally you want to, I'll put it this way, you want to have a good sense about what the professor's going to say.
Okay.
Right. And generally a good measure that's going to be the grade you get in the class. But it's not the only measure. Right. So what I say is make sure you have a good sense of what the professor thinks about you and your potential before you ask for the letter. before you get a letter from them.
Okay. That's wonderful. Guys, if you're in the live stream, please leave your questions in the comment section. We're going to bring them up and address them. So I think Christine got her answer. Dr. Sobek is saying, hey, it's a good indicator of what he's going to say, right? If you flunk in the class and you're going to ask for a letter of recommendation, it's not going to be a really strong one, I presume. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share the feed so that other people can join the conversation. We want to get to know what you think. Dr. Sobek, we talked about the standardized testing and everything. People were like, due to COVID, a lot of departments are getting more relaxed on that, right? And so how important was it as part of the process? Like if they could let it go, I know one of my friends was talking to me earlier today. If it was one of the things they could let go, then how important was it in the overall process?
Well, there is an ongoing debate in universities about the sort of importance of standardized tests, right? And one view is that they are not a perfect measure of a student's potential, and they're not, right? Mm-hmm. Therefore, we don't need them anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And there are some departments now in universities probably that are no longer requiring GRE scores, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would say, well, number one, we're not going to drop the requirement here. We did during COVID because students just couldn't take it, and you have to. But it's sort of like I said. This is from my perspective, it's a low information environment, and when you have a lot of uncertainty, more information is better than less information. Yeah. Right. And so if you remove the GREs, right, then now more emphasis is placed on your transcript. More emphasis is placed on the letters, and transcripts aren't a perfect indicator of your potential either, and neither are letters of recommendations. And so essentially by removing the GRE scores, you now are putting more emphasis on other measures that are just as equally imperfect as the GRE scores, right? And so my advice would be to take them and to do as best as you can, because the more ways you can demonstrate your potential, the better. Okay. And if you think about it this way too, you're competing against other students, and maybe you're competing against someone who did the GREs, right? And so you think about this, right? So think of two students who have basically identical applications, right? Except one has GRE scores, one doesn't. Who are you going to lean towards accepting, right? The one where you have more information, right? And so it's sort of, sometimes you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, information-wise, in terms of the application.
That's true. Okay, so now I would encourage everyone, hey, just take it. It's more information for the committee to make a decision on. And I think for a lot of people coming in, right, the application process gets tedious when you get asked things like statement of purpose. For a lot of applicants, we don't actually know what the committee is looking at. What does a good statement of purpose look like? What really goes into that?
I'll give you a secret. And we can't share it. No one who's not on the live stream can share this. So this has to be our little secret.
It stays on here. It stays on the live stream.
It has to stay here. Because I don't want everyone using this. But really good statements of purposes are ones in which they make actual mentions of faculty in the department. Right. So if you read a statement of purpose, and generally it's sort of like, hey, I'm interested in X, Y, and Z. And the really good ones say, and this actually works well with so-and-so's research agenda, right? Because what that signals to us is that you care about the department, you're interested in the department, and you've done homework, right? And a student who is willing to do homework and extra effort in their application is probably going to do homework and extra effort when they're in the program. So being able to say, this whose research my interest dovetails with, right? That is a really strong indicator in a statement of purpose. Makes, I think, a very strong statement of purpose. But keep it here. Keep it here.
Yep, we're keeping it here. It's for only the people in the live stream. This is just gold. My brain's you just blew my mind. I would never have thought about that. And for those of you here now, the 28 lucky people who are on the live stream right now, it's just gold. We're keeping it in here. We're never telling anyone else. And if you didn't hear it, just go back and watch the playback. I am not going to share it. I'm not even going to clip this and put this anywhere. I promise. It's really good. It's really good. Guess what? For most of the people watching, they wouldn't get this. But Dr. Sobek, look who just commented.
Oh my goodness gracious. Doc Neptune.
Doc Neptune is on, and guys, later in the conversation, you're going to know why this matters. Doc Neptune, we're so happy you're on the live stream. We're going to be talking some more about our side business, our side gig after this. But yeah, now we've gotten through the. Let's talk about the transcripts a little more, because there's so many questions about the transcripts. You know, universities have very different ways of presenting these transcripts, right? Some of them are not even in English, right? And the strength of the curriculums are different, right? So I could go to a university with a fairly easy program and get, you know, a 4.0. Then I can go somewhere else with a more rigorous program and get, say, a 65 on a 100-point scale. Would you recommend that we standardize our transcripts, which is what some people do, where they pay for a service that standardizes their transcript and then brings it to a 4-point scale instead of a 100-point scale like my university does? Is this something that would help our application?
I think it helps, right? I mean, because what we don't know how every university around the world sort of, scales, right? So the more the better. A lot of times, though, in the transcripts, they have a little sort of information sheet that allows, but even that's not perfect, right? I don't know how well the university. So yeah, I mean, those things would help, I'm sure.
Okay. So I made a promise before the show that anybody who was going to be in the show at a particular time was going to get that standardization process paid for. Apparently, it cost $250. And a couple of my friends and I decided we're going to take care of it for one lucky viewer. So if you're on here right now and you need your transcript standardized, just leave standardize in the chat box right now. Standardize and just where you're watching the stream from. So standardize Ghana, standardize US, standardize wherever you're watching it from right now. Just the quickest finger, the first person to send it in gets their transcript standardized, and it will help your application process, because just as we just had, it's going to be a very key part in the process. It really helps out, right? Okay, so we're getting a few standardized. And Kwame, you're not part. Kwame is here. I'm going to put it there. He is not part. And so, yeah, please, if you need to get your transcript standardized, just leave standardized and where you're watching the stream from, and then share, hit the thumbs up button, and then we're good to go. Let's do it right now. And apparently it helps. So, Dr. Sobek, we're talking about the do's and the things we have to do as applicants. What are some of the things you say are absolute do nots in the application process?
Do not. I mean, I guess it's hard. Do not skip out parts of it. Do not. Do not have. I think the biggest thing is it's not those things you don't have it under control. I'm trying to think of things that have really sort of sank applications. Obviously, really bad GPA or GREs. I mean, but that's sort of, this is where I said before, make sure you ask about the letter writers, if they can write good letters, because there's been a couple scenarios in which, letter writers can write positively, but they can also send strong signals. And that sort of raise red flags. So for instance, you can have a letter writer say something like, I recommend that this student would require a lot of effort to get through the program, right? Or stuff like they work hard, or there's phrases in which that can raise red flags, which is why I think it's really important to make sure when you get letter writers, you have a good sense of what they're going to say.
Right. So absolutely, one of the absolute do nots are just leaving the letter writers on their own. You have to, one, make sure they're writing positive letters for you, and two, like, they don't put anything in there that would send signals to the committee that this student might be a little more work than you'd want to handle, right? But guys, that statement of purpose key is very important. If you missed it, watch this feed again. We're going to post the video much later. Go back and watch that. It's going to change your application process, right? And I want us to wrap up the application process and look at another part of the graduate stuff, right? And so with the application packet, one, complete the application and all of that. What have you seen about an application that made it stand out? Like, aside all the basic checking all the boxes, what's one thing or what's one memorable applicant you've seen aside mine? Because I
Oh yeah,
work
well,
up in the
aside from
office.
yours, oh my goodness, I have yours hanging up in my office.
Yeah, I think we should have taken a picture of that day.
Yeah,
I'll share the story someday on the live stream.
Yeah. So the question is, but I think honestly, there is no one thing, right? I mean, it is. I've seen applicants that are just, they're standardized, and so their numbers are just super strong, right? So great GREs, great GPA, right? There have been some in which, the letters recommendations are just absolutely, hands above the rest, and there are some that are just, students who are really clear, had done their homework, and just, really thought hard about how they fit in the department, and so I don't think there is really one thing that would just sort of, hey, it really varies in some sense.
Okay, I think we've gotten enough with the application process. I hope the viewers have gotten enough to be able to now better apply to grad school. Like, if nothing at all, that SOP trick should put you in a good position, right, to be able to apply and get secure funding. Now, for those of us in grad school, right, I want you to give us a little overview. I took your professionalization class. It probably is something I would recommend everybody take. If you can get Dr. Sobek on for professionalization, is important. You should take it. But give a brief overview of the job market for graduate students, like why people should think of grad school and what awaits them at the end of grad school.
So I mean, in some sense, it depends upon what the student wants. And so there's the academic job market, there's the non-academic job market. And just keep in mind that when you go into a PhD program, most of the time it's geared towards the academic job market. This is not to say that, grad students don't ever get non-academic jobs. They do, right? But this is think about it this way. Most of the people in the department probably never got a real job, right? They got an academic job. And so what kind of job market do they know? They're going to know the academic job market. And so it's, most of these programs are going to be geared towards getting you an academic job. Really, in terms of that, you need to make sure that you set yourself out to succeed, which would be not only doing the program well, doing on the program, but also research. That this is what is, in terms of the academic job market, is going to get you the most looks. Even if you want to go to a teaching university, right? Applicants that have more research is going to get a stronger look than those that don't. It doesn't guarantee anything, right? But this ends up being one of the key points to think about when you're starting grad school, which is you can go through and hit all of the requirements of a PhD program, right? Take all the classes, do the comprehensive exams, write the dissertation, and yet set yourself up for failure, right? Because those are the bare minimum things that are required to get you the PhD, but those aren't the bare minimum of things that are required to get you a job.
Okay.
Right. So there's two different standards. There's the standard that will get you the PhD, and there's a standard that will actually make you competitive on the job market. And the standard of being competitive on the job market is a lot higher than the standard to get the PhD. And so when you're in grad school, we make sure you have that second standard in mind as opposed to the first one. Because obviously, if you reach the second standard, you're going to get your PhD.
Okay. So now you gave us a trick for the application process. What's the best trick for surviving grad school and making yourself competitive on the job market?
Well, those are two different questions. Surviving grad school and making yourself competitive. In terms of making yourself competitive on the job market, you need to have strong relationship with faculty. Now, this is assuming that you have the publications and the research, right? But when you're applying to the job market, letters of recommendations are really important because when you're hiring, nor when you're hiring an applicant, right? You're hiring someone's to do research, but you're also hiring a colleague. And so it's a different sort of process. We're not just hiring someone to sit in their office and to do research. I mean, we are, but there's also someone that we're going to have lunch with, that we're going to serve on committees with, we're going to do all these different things with. And so you want to make sure that it's someone who's going to be a good colleague.
Okay.
And the letters are the only things that can speak to that. Right? They can speak. Your CV can speak to your publications, right? Your what is it called? The class evaluations can speak to you as a teacher, right? Or you can write a teaching philosophy, but nothing can really speak to how you are as a colleague.
Okay.
Other than those
letters of recommendations. That's interesting.
And that's an important part of the process as well.
Okay. So now we've gotten what we need to be successful in our job search, and the next step. Now, how do we survive grad school? Your best advice to surviving grad school?
You need to find a way to turn your mind off. That this is academics in general, right? But this is being in grad school is something where you can get burnt out really quickly, and because you could always be doing work, right? So it's not as if you're working at the post office where you go there and you have an 8-hour shift, and when you go home you don't have to deliver mail anymore, right? And you can just do whatever, right? You can go to the office for 8 hours and come home and be like, I could be doing a reading, right? You could be going to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and thinking like, I could be doing this, right? So it's very easy to sort of always be, not necessarily always working, but always stressing over working or not working. And that is something that is going to create a lot of stress over time, and it can burn you out. And so finding something that can turn off the thought process of of grad school, right? Allow you to sort of reset and refresh becomes absolutely vital. That's trick number one. Trick number two is, for your dissertation, do something you love. A topic that you have an undying interest. Okay. Because you're going to get really bored of it otherwise. In fact, even if it's something you really love,
you do get bored.
You're going to, anything you do for 8 hours a day or whatever for 2 years, you're going to get sick of it for a while.
Yep.
And if you're just doing it because you think, this would be a good topic for the job market, or this would be you're going to get, you're going to end up hating it, right? So it has to be something, so in the dark days of the dissertating, whenever you're just sick of it, that undying interest in the topic is what gets you through.
Keeps you going.
And so make sure you have a passion for their topic, your research.
These are just wonderful advice that would help. I mean, you told me, I just didn't listen.
I picked the topic. Doc here has a question. In terms of applying for jobs, how much does involvement in things outside your research classes play? In some sense, it depends upon the job, right? So I would say, I guess in terms of things outside of research class, and so say for instance you're presenting at academic conferences or research conferences. Those things can matter, not necessarily in the job application, right? But those are, when you're doing that, you're putting your name out there, right? And so you're going to meet people who are researching similar topic, right? And so if I'm going to a academic conference and I'm presenting my research on the causes of war, right? I'm going to be interacting with people who also are interested in the causes of war, who are at universities across the country, across the world, and I can find collaborators that way. I can find, sometimes you can find letter writers, right? So if you meet someone here, like at a conference, and you hit it off, and you communicate afterwards, and then maybe I think I met somebody at a conference, and we hit it off. And then when I was in grad school, they emailed me and said, "Hey, I'm writing a paper. Do you want to write with me?" So I got a paper out of it. And then he ended up being some of my letter writers, right? And so it's sort of, and that sends a really strong signal, right? If you can get a letter writer, or if you're collaborating with people outside of your university, man, that says great potential. It means that you're really engaged in the community already.
That's important. I think that's a key trick.